I was dusting the living room shelves when I heard the front door open. The sound startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. Then I saw him. Daniel? My heart leapt. You didn't say you were coming today? He smiled, that same crooked grin from his childhood, but something in his eyes felt nervous. Behind him stood a young woman holding a small bouquet. She had kind eyes, soft blonde hair tied in a loose bun, and the kind of hesitant smile people wear when they're unsure of their welcome. This is Claire, Daniel said, stepping aside. Mom, I wanted you to meet her. I wiped my hands on my apron, still trying to absorb the surprise. Oh, Claire. I've heard that name before, haven't I? I reached out, and she shook my hand gently. Daniel nodded. Yeah, I've mentioned her a few times. Of course you have, I said, forcing a smile. Well, come in, both of you. The place isn't exactly ready for guests, but I led them to the living room where sunlight spilled through lace curtains. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and freshly baked bread. Sit, please. I'll make tea, I said, already heading toward the kitchen. My heart fluttered with joy. Maybe this was it. Maybe he was finally going to tell me about his engagement plans. I'd been waiting for that day. As the kettle hissed, I rehearsed my words in my head. I'm so happy for you, Daniel. She's lovely. You deserve someone good. When I returned with the tray, they were sitting side by side, hands almost touching. I placed the cups down, pretending not to notice. So, I began lightly, when's the wedding? Or are we still in the planning stage? Claire's smile froze. She looked at Daniel, then back at me. Her lips parted, and for a moment, she seemed unsure whether to speak. Daniel shifted in his seat. Mom, something about his tone made my stomach tighten. Claire cleared her throat, her voice soft but steady. Actually, we got married yesterday. The teacup slipped from my fingers and clattered against the saucer. I'm sorry, what? She swallowed. We got married yesterday. Just the two of us. I stared at her, then at Daniel. My mind went blank. You got married? Yesterday? Without telling me? Daniel leaned forward, his voice calm but defensive. It wasn't meant to be like that. We wanted to keep it simple. Simple? My voice cracked. You call getting married without your family simple? Claire's eyes filled with guilt. We didn't mean to hurt you. It all happened so fast. I tried to steady my breathing, but my chest felt tight. The room suddenly seemed too small, too quiet, as though every clock tick was mocking me. I've been planning your engagement dinner, I whispered. Do you have any idea how happy I was thinking this was finally happening? I know, Daniel said softly. I should have told you. I just thought you'd overreact. Overreact? I laughed, though it came out brittle. I'm your mother, Daniel. I raised you alone. I've been waiting years for this moment, and you decided I didn't deserve to be part of it? He ran a hand through his hair. It wasn't about deserving, Mom. I just didn't want the drama. You know how you get when you worry. The words hit like a slap. So it's my fault then? You couldn't trust me enough to share one of the most important days of your life? Claire spoke gently. It wasn't about trust. We were afraid it would turn into something big. We wanted something quiet, just about us. I stared at her ring, thin silver, gleaming under the afternoon light, and something inside me cracked. Quiet, I repeated. I see. I stood up, needing distance. The floorboards creaked beneath me as I walked to the window. Outside, the garden was blooming, the roses I'd planted years ago glowing red against the fence. They looked alive. I didn't. Daniel's voice broke the silence. Mom, please don't be upset. I turned back to him slowly. Don't be upset? You've been hiding this from me, Daniel. You didn't even call. I found out after the fact, sitting in my own living room. He sighed. I'm sorry, okay? But we wanted to start our life without all the noise. You know how everyone in the family gets involved. So you cut me out completely. That's not what I meant. No, that's exactly what you meant, I said quietly. You thought I'd be the problem. Claire looked down at her lap, twisting her fingers. We really are sorry. We love each other, and we just wanted to make it official before things got complicated. I pressed a hand to my chest. You didn't even give me a chance to meet her properly before marrying her. Daniel frowned. You're meeting her now. The coldness in his tone pierced me. Meeting her now? I repeated. After the wedding? What am I supposed to do with that? For a moment, no one spoke. Only the faint ticking of the clock filled the silence. Finally, Claire said softly, We'd like your blessing, if you can give it. I looked at her, really looked. She seemed kind, gentle, but there was something in her eyes that reminded me of fear. Fear of me. I sat back down, suddenly feeling older than I had that morning. Blessing, I murmured. That's a funny word, isn't it? You've already made your vows. What does my blessing change now? Daniel shifted uncomfortably. It changes everything for me, Mom. I met his eyes. There was sincerity there, but also a distance I hadn't noticed before. Somewhere along the way, I'd lost my little boy. I just wish, I whispered, that I'd been part of it. He leaned forward, his voice breaking slightly. I know, and I'm sorry. We didn't plan to hurt you. We thought, maybe we'd tell you once things settled. Settled, I repeated, shaking my head. Do you even hear yourself? You thought your marriage, your wife, was something to settle before I was allowed to know. Claire's voice trembled. We were scared, honestly. My parents didn't approve either. It was a lot. That caught me off guard. They didn't approve? She nodded. They think we're rushing. We both felt stuck between our families. Something softened inside me. I could feel her sincerity. She wasn't the villain in this story. None of us were. Still, the ache remained. You should have trusted me enough to tell me, I said quietly. Even if you thought I'd worry. That's what mothers do. Daniel's shoulders slumped. I know. For a long time, none of us spoke. The tea had gone cold. The sunlight faded into an amber glow, and I could hear the distant hum of traffic outside. Finally, Daniel stood. We should probably go. Claire has to work in the morning. I nodded, numb. Of course. Claire rose hesitantly, her voice barely a whisper. Thank you for having us. I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Congratulations, both of you. Daniel hesitated near the door. Mom, please don't hate us. I met his gaze. That same boy who once held my hand crossing the street, who used to say I was his favorite person in the world. I could never hate you, I said. But you've broken something I don't know how to fix. His expression fell. I'll call you soon. And then they were gone. The door clicked shut, leaving behind silence so thick I could hear my own heartbeat. I stood there for a moment, staring at the empty hallway, the faint smell of their perfume still lingering in the air. I picked up the untouched teacup from the table and whispered to no one. Married yesterday. The words tasted bitter. That night, I sat by the window long after the sun had set, wondering when exactly my son stopped needing me, and why I never saw it coming. The house felt hollow after they left, like all the warmth had walked out the door with them. Their teacups still sat on the table, half full, the lemon slices floating lifelessly on top. I stood there for a long time, staring at them, trying to understand what had just happened. I'd always imagined Daniel's wedding day, the music, the laughter, the family gathered under one roof. I never imagined finding out it had already happened, casually, in my own living room. When night came, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Claire's awkward smile, Daniel's guilt-ridden eyes, and that silver ring glinting on her finger. By morning, I was still awake, sitting by the window with a blanket around my shoulders when Helen called. Did you sleep at all? She asked. Not really, I said quietly. I keep thinking about it. I just don't understand why he couldn't tell me. There was a sigh on the other end. Maybe he thought you'd overreact. I wouldn't have, I snapped, then paused. At least, I don't think I would have. Helen hesitated. You know how protective you are of him. Maybe he thought you'd question his choice. I rubbed my temples, exhaustion settling in. I'm his mother, Helen. I've earned the right to have an opinion. I gave him everything I had. I know you did, she said gently. But maybe he just needed to make a choice on his own. Her calm tone made me angrier. And not invite me to the wedding? That's not independence. That's betrayal. Helen went quiet for a moment, then said softly, You've always seen Daniel as the boy who needed you. Maybe he's trying to prove he doesn't anymore. Her words cut deeper than I expected. I wanted to argue, but my throat tightened. He didn't have to prove it this way. Maybe not, she said. But you can't undo it now. You just have to decide how to handle what's left. After we hung up, I sat in silence, staring at Daniel's framed photo on the mantel, his college graduation picture. I remembered that day so vividly. He'd stood taller than me, wearing his cap and gown, laughing as I fixed his tie. He'd hugged me and whispered, Couldn't have done it without you, Mom. That memory twisted inside me now. Somewhere along the way, the boy who once looked at me with pride had started looking at me like I was a problem to manage. I walked through the house aimlessly, touching things that once belonged to him. The guitar in the corner, the old coat he'd left behind. Everything smelled faintly of time and distance. The kitchen clock ticked loudly. I opened the drawer where I kept old letters, birthday cards, bits of his childhood, little reminders of when we were just mother and son, no walls between us. Then I noticed his last text message from a month ago. I hadn't opened it before. My hands trembled slightly as I tapped it open. "Hey Mom, got a big surprise coming soon. Can't wait to tell you in person." I stared at it until the words blurred. That was before he stopped calling as often, before the silence began. I whispered to myself, that was the surprise. The realization stung. He'd wanted to tell me, at first. Something must have changed. Maybe it was me. Maybe I said something that pushed him away. I scrolled through our last few conversations. He'd mentioned Claire twice, once about her new job, another time about a trip they took. Both times I remember changing the subject. I'd told him not to rush, that love could wait until he was more stable. And now, he'd proven me wrong. Later that afternoon, Helen showed up unannounced, holding a bag of groceries and that look only sisters can give. Equal parts pity and concern. "You look awful," she said bluntly, setting the bag on the counter. "Thank you," I murmured. Exactly what I needed to hear. She poured me coffee and sat across from me. "You've been torturing yourself, haven't you?" I avoided her eyes. He lied to me. "He didn't lie," she said softly. "He just didn't tell you." That's the same thing. Not always. Her calmness irritated me, but I couldn't bring myself to argue. She took a sip of coffee and studied me. "You think he did it to hurt you?" I shook my head. "No, that's what makes it worse. He didn't even think about me at all." Helen reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You can't hold on to him forever. He's married now. He's trying to start a life." I pulled my hand away, my voice shaking. "And what about me? What do I start? I spent my whole life building his future, and now that he has it, I'm nothing." Her eyes softened. "That's not true." "It feels true," I whispered. The silence between us grew heavy. The kettle whistled softly in the background. Helen finally said, "You have to talk to him. Not to accuse, but to understand." "I can't. I wouldn't even know what to say." "Then write it," she said. "You always think better when you write." I nodded faintly, though I didn't mean it. That evening, after she left, I sat at the dining table with a blank sheet of paper in front of me. The pen felt heavy in my hand. I tried to write Dear Daniel, but the words wouldn't come. Everything I felt was too tangled: anger, sadness, guilt. Instead, I opened my laptop and stared at our old photos. Daniel as a toddler on my lap, Daniel on his first bike, Daniel blowing out birthday candles. Each picture felt like a tiny knife. Memories frozen in time, unaware of how they'd fade into something painful. My phone buzzed. For a second my heart jumped. Maybe it was him. But it was Helen again. "Don't overthink. Get some rest. Rest." I didn't even remember what that felt like. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and went to sit in the living room. The house was too quiet. The kind of silence that feels alive, like it's watching you. I looked at the empty sofa where Daniel and Claire had sat. The indentations in the cushions were still there, faint but visible. It almost felt like they might walk back in, laugh, and say it was all some kind of joke. I spoke aloud, though no one could hear me. "Why didn't you just tell me, Daniel?" My voice cracked. I would have tried to understand. But maybe that was the problem. He didn't believe I could. As the night deepened, my reflection in the window stared back, tired eyes, lined with regret. I thought about all the times I'd tried to guide him, correct him, protect him. Maybe I'd mistaken control for love. I closed my eyes and whispered, maybe Helen's right. Maybe he just wanted space to be himself. The words didn't make it hurt any less. I reached for the framed photo again, running my thumb along its edge. "You used to tell me everything," I said softly. "Even the little things." A tear slipped down my cheek before I realized it. I picked up my phone one last time, opened the old text, and read it again. Big surprise coming soon. For a moment, I imagined an alternate version of that day. Daniel walking through the door saying, "Mom, I have someone I want you to meet," and me hugging them both, smiling, celebrating. But that didn't happen. And now, the space between what was and what could have been felt endless. The tea grew cold beside me, untouched. I whispered into the quiet room. I missed it. I missed the signs, The clock ticked toward midnight, each second sharper than the last. And for the first time, I allowed myself to feel it. Not just the anger or confusion, but the ache beneath it all. The ache of realizing that love, no matter how deep, can still leave you behind. I didn't know it then, but that was the night denial gave way to pain, the kind that doesn't just fade. It settles in, and I had no idea that this wound, raw and aching, was only the beginning of what was yet to come. I spent the whole day preparing dinner. I wasn't sure I even wanted to cook. The table was set perfectly. White linen, candles, my best china. Everything looked warm and inviting, though inside I felt nothing but cold. When the doorbell rang, I froze for a second before forcing myself to move. "Hi, Mom," Daniel said when I opened the door. His smile was polite, careful, not the kind that used to light up his face. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. Claire followed him in, holding a small box wrapped in soft gold paper. "We brought dessert," she said quietly. "Tiramisu. I wasn't sure what you liked, so—" "That's thoughtful, thank you," I replied. My voice came out tighter than I intended. I led them to the dining room. The smell of roast chicken filled the air, and the soft hum of music played from the old radio in the corner. Everything was ready, except me. "Smells amazing," Daniel said as he sat down. "I hope it's good," I said, sitting opposite them. "It's been a while since I cooked for 3. Claire smiled faintly. "It looks wonderful." We began eating, the clinking of cutlery louder than the conversation. Daniel kept glancing at me, as if waiting for an invisible storm to break. Claire tried to make small talk about her job, the apartment they were renting, even the weather, but the tension made her words hang awkwardly in the air. Finally, I said, "So how long have you two known each other?" Daniel hesitated. "Almost 2 years." "2 years," I repeated softly, "and I'm only finding out now that you're married." He shifted in his chair. "Mom." "I'm not upset about her," I said quickly, glancing at Claire. "You seem lovely, dear. I'm upset about how I was shut out." Claire looked down. "It wasn't personal." "Of course it was personal," I said, unable to hold it in any longer. "I'm your mother. Everything about my son's life is personal to me." Daniel sighed. "We didn't plan to hide it. It just happened faster than we thought." I stared at him. "You happened to get married?" He rubbed the back of his neck. We were already talking about it, and one thing led to another. It felt right in the moment. "Right in the moment," I echoed, my voice trembling. "And not once did it occur to you to call me before making the biggest decision of your life." His fork clinked against the plate. "I knew you'd make it a whole production, Mom. You'd call the family, plan a big wedding, stress about every detail." "That's what mothers do," I said sharply. "They care." "I didn't want that," he said quietly. "I wanted something simple." Claire reached over and touched his hand, her voice soft but firm. We both did. I looked at their fingers intertwined, at the silver bands catching the light, and something inside me twisted. "You two really decided everything without me, didn't you?" Claire's voice was almost a whisper. "We didn't mean to hurt you." "Well, you did," I said, unable to stop the words. "You hurt me deeply." For a long moment, no one spoke. The ticking of the kitchen clock filled the silence like a heartbeat. I tried to eat, but every bite felt heavy, almost impossible to swallow. I could see Daniel avoiding my eyes, and Claire pretending to focus on her plate. I forced a smile, trying to shift the mood. "So what do your parents think, Claire?" Her expression faltered. "They haven't taken it very well." "Oh," I leaned back slightly. "So it's not just me then?" Daniel frowned. "Mom, don't do that." "Do what?" "Make it sound like we're children who need approval." "Maybe because you are my child," I snapped. "And I thought I'd at least get a chance to bless your marriage before it happened." He exhaled sharply. "I told you, you wouldn't have approved." The words hit me like a blow. I froze, hearing them echo in my head. "You really think so little of me?" I whispered. Daniel's tone softened slightly. "You've always had strong opinions, Mom." I didn't want another argument. I just wanted peace. "Peace," I said, my voice breaking. "You think this feels peaceful to me? You've turned one of the happiest days of your life into one of the loneliest of mine." Claire looked between us helplessly. "Maybe we should go—" "No," I said, my tone firm. "You'll stay and finish dinner. You're family now, whether I was invited to the wedding or not." Her eyes widened slightly. Daniel looked at me, searching for anger, but I was too tired to give him that satisfaction. The rest of the meal dragged on painfully. Claire tried to compliment the food, Daniel asked about my garden, and I answered with polite, empty words. But every time I looked at them, I couldn't stop seeing what I'd missed. The vows, the smiles, the moment my son said, "I do," without me there. When they finally stood to leave, I followed them to the door. Claire handed me the small box they'd brought earlier. "This is for you," she said gently. "Just a little thank you for having us." I unwrapped it after they left. Inside was a delicate glass ornament, 2 doves intertwined, etched with D and C. I stared at it, feeling my throat tighten. It was beautiful, thoughtful, painful. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I kept replaying Daniel's words. "You wouldn't have approved." What did that mean? Had I really been that controlling? That difficult to talk to? The next morning, as I watered the plants on my porch, my neighbor, Mrs. Patel, waved from across the fence. "Lovely evening last night?" she asked. I hesitated. "You saw them?" "Oh, yes, months ago actually," she said with a knowing smile. "I used to see them walk by hand in hand. Looked like newlyweds even then." My heart sank. "Months ago?" Around spring, I think. Such a cute couple. I wondered when you'd mention them." I forced a weak laugh. "I guess I didn't know yet." Her face fell. "Oh, I see." I nodded, pretending it didn't hurt, but it did, more than I could admit. When I went back inside, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty plates from last night, still waiting to be washed. The house smelled faintly of roast chicken and sadness. In that moment, I realized something painful. They hadn't just built a life without me. They'd been living it for months, and I'd been completely blind to it. I picked up the ornament again, running my thumb over the engraved initials. It caught the light, sparkling softly, like something fragile that could break with the slightest pressure. My voice came out barely above a whisper. "You wouldn't have approved." The words burned over and over until they became a question I couldn't stop asking myself. What kind of mother makes her son afraid to share his happiness? And for the first time, I didn't have an answer. The next morning, my phone rang earlier than usual. I almost didn't answer. My head was pounding from another sleepless night, but something in me said I should. "Hello?" "Hi, it's Claire." Her voice was soft, shaky. I could tell she'd hesitated before calling. "I hope I'm not bothering you," she added quickly. I really need to talk to you, alone." The words "alone" made my stomach twist. "Is something wrong?" "No, not exactly," she said. "I just think you deserve to know the truth." For a moment, I didn't say anything. Part of me wanted to hang up, to stay angry and distant, but the other part, the mother in me, couldn't. "All right," I said. "Where?" "There's a little cafe on Maple Street. Around 1? "I'll be there." When I hung up, I stood staring at the phone, unsure if I'd just agreed to make things better or worse. By the time I arrived at the cafe, the air smelled of fresh coffee and rain. I spotted her by the window, nervous, fidgeting with the edge of her napkin. She looked younger than I remembered, fragile almost. When she saw me, she stood quickly. "Hi," she said. I nodded. "Hi." We both sat. The silence between us felt heavy, like we were standing on opposite sides of a bridge neither of us knew how to cross. She folded her hands together. "Thank you for meeting me." I stirred my coffee slowly. "You said you wanted to explain." She nodded, taking a deep breath. "Yes, I think you deserve to know why things happened the way they did." Her voice trembled slightly, but there was sincerity in it, the kind that's hard to fake. "I know you probably think I pushed Daniel into getting married in secret," she began, "but that's not what happened." I didn't respond. I wanted her to keep talking. "My parents," She paused, eyes darting to the window before returning to me. They didn't want me to marry him. Not because of who he is, but because they didn't think he could give me stability. I frowned. Stability? She nodded. They think he's too idealistic. His business was struggling, and they wanted me to wait, or honestly, to find someone else. Her words hit me harder than I expected. Daniel's business? Struggling? He hadn't said a word to me. I tried to keep my tone steady. And that's why you eloped? She shook her head. Not just that. Daniel didn't tell you because he was afraid you'd say the same thing. That he should get his life together first. He said you'd never support him if you knew how bad things were. For a moment, the room blurred. I stared down at my hands. He thought I'd judge him. Claire's voice softened. He thought you'd worry, and he couldn't handle disappointing you again. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I never meant to make him feel like that. I know, she said quietly. He does too. But when both our parents kept pushing, mine telling me to leave him and him feeling like he couldn't face you, we just ran out of air, so we decided to get married quietly. It was the only thing that felt like ours. I looked at her then, really looked at her. She wasn't arrogant or careless, not the way I'd painted her in my mind. She looked scared, honest, and far too young to carry this much weight. Did you think I'd hate you for it? I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. Yes. The honesty stung, but it was real. Your parents still don't know, I asked. They do now, she said softly, and it hasn't gone well. They think I've ruined my future. Her eyes glistened, and she blinked quickly, forcing a smile that didn't last. Funny, isn't it? Two families, both just wanting the best for us, and somehow we made everyone miserable. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to defend myself, to explain how much I loved Daniel, how hard I'd worked for his future. But I realized she already knew that. She'd probably heard it all from him. Instead, I said quietly, "You're not what I expected." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. What did you expect? I smiled faintly. Someone reckless. Someone who didn't care how I felt. But I can see that's not true. I care, she said immediately. More than you think. I just didn't know how to fix things after we hurt you. The way she said we, not Daniel, not he, made me see her differently. She wasn't trying to replace me or steal him away. She was just trying to find her place beside him. I leaned back, my voice softer now. You know, when Daniel was little, he used to build things out of scraps. Old wood, broken pieces of toys. He'd spend hours making something out of nothing. I guess I thought I could do the same, build his life for him, make it safe. Claire smiled faintly. You did make it safe. That's why he loves you so much. But maybe he needed to see if he could build something on his own. Her words hit a tender spot I'd been avoiding. She was right, and it terrified me. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Outside, rain streaked the window, blurring the streetlights into gold smears. I thought about all the things I'd done for Daniel, the sacrifices, the long nights, the dreams I'd put on hold. And yet, somehow, in loving him so fiercely, I'd made him feel small. Claire's voice broke the silence. He wanted to tell you that day, you know. But when you started talking about an engagement party, he panicked. He didn't want to ruin your excitement. A sad laugh escaped me. So he ruined it later instead. She looked guilty. We didn't plan it like that. It just happened faster than we expected. And once we did it, we didn't know how to come back from it. I nodded slowly. It must have been lonely. Her eyes softened. It was. For the first time, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt toward her before. Empathy. I said quietly, "You remind me of myself when I was your age." Her eyes widened slightly. Really? I was young, Stubborn, convinced the world was against me, I said. When I married Robert, his family didn't approve either. They said I wasn't good enough for him. We eloped, too. Her mouth fell open slightly. You did? I nodded. Robert's mother didn't speak to us for almost a year. I told myself I didn't care, but I did. It haunted me until the day she forgave us. The irony wasn't lost on me. History really does repeat itself. Claire leaned forward slightly. So, how did she forgive you? She met me, I said. She stopped listening to the version of me she'd built in her mind and saw who I really was. Claire smiled faintly. I hope one day you'll see me like that too. Her words caught me off guard, not because of what she said, but how much I wanted to believe it. I sighed, glancing out the window. You're brave for calling me today. She shook her head. No, I was terrified, but I couldn't let things stay like this. I don't want Daniel to lose you because of me. That sentence, simple, raw, broke something open inside me. I reached across the table and touched her hand. It was cold, trembling slightly. You won't make him lose me. Not if I can help it. She blinked back tears. Thank you. We sat in silence for a while, the rain easing outside, leaving a faint mist against the glass. When I finally stood to leave, she said quietly, Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think you'll ever forgive us? I paused, choosing my words carefully. I think I already started. Her lips parted, and for the first time, I saw her truly smile. As I walked back to my car, the cool air brushed against my face, carrying the smell of wet pavement and coffee. My mind felt lighter, though my heart still ached. I sat behind the wheel for a moment, staring at the raindrops sliding down the windshield. For the first time since that awful day, I didn't feel anger. Just sadness, and maybe a quiet hope. I whispered to myself, she's not the enemy. She's just another person trying to love him. But as the engine started, another thought crept in. One I couldn't shake. If Daniel had kept this secret from me, what else hadn't he told me? That question lingered in my chest all the way home, turning what had begun as understanding into something heavier, a mix of compassion and quiet suspicion. And deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of the secrets between us. The news spread faster than I expected. One dinner invitation, one slip of conversation, and suddenly everyone knew. My phone wouldn't stop ringing for 2 days straight, each call filled with opinions I never asked for. The first was Thomas. My brother had always been blunt, never one to filter his thoughts. I can't believe Daniel did that, he said, his voice sharp through the phone. It's downright disrespectful, Margaret. You raised him better than that. I know, I said quietly. He's your only son, and he didn't even have the decency to tell you first? That's not love. That's selfishness. His words stung, even though I'd said the same things to myself. He's not a bad person, Thomas. He just made a choice. A choice that humiliated you, he shot back. If Mom were alive to see this, please don't, I interrupted. Let's not drag her into this. He sighed heavily, the way he always did when he thought I was being too soft. You can't let him get away with it, Maggie. He needs to learn actions have consequences. When the call ended, I felt smaller somehow, like every word had chipped away at my ability to defend Daniel, even to myself. Later that afternoon, Emma stopped by. My niece had always been bright, curious, full of opinions that clashed beautifully with Thomas's old-fashioned views. She came bearing coffee and a kind smile. I heard about Daniel, she said, sitting beside me on the couch. Uncle Thomas is furious, isn't he? You could say that. She grinned sadly. He doesn't understand people my age. Everything's supposed to follow a rule book in his world. But Daniel's not wrong for doing what he did. I glanced at her. You really think that? I do, she said softly. Love isn't something you wait to make perfect. You grab it when you can. Maybe it's messy, maybe it's impulsive, but it's still love. Her words lingered in the air. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to feel that same warmth for my son again. But all I could feel was the sting of exclusion. I just wish he'd trusted me, I murmured. That's all. Emma reached for my hand. Maybe he didn't want to disappoint you. I stared down at our hands, hers young and certain, mine lined and trembling. Then he already did. She didn't argue. She just squeezed my hand a little tighter, her silence more comforting than words. After she left, the house fell quiet again. Too quiet. Even the ticking of the clock sounded louder than usual. Daniel hadn't called in over a week. Claire hadn't either. The absence was its own kind of punishment. Not loud, but constant. I found myself checking my phone obsessively, hoping for a message, a missed call, anything. But it never came. I started keeping my phone on the kitchen counter, just so I could hear it ring if it ever did. But all I got were calls from people who wanted to analyze what went wrong, or worse, offer sympathy I didn't want. One evening, I sat in the living room with the TV on mute, the screen flickering aimlessly. My thoughts were louder than anything the television could play. How had it come to this? My son, my own flesh and blood, living a life I wasn't allowed to be part of. I reached for a pen and paper, and before I knew it, I was writing. The words poured out faster than I could think. "Dear Daniel," I wrote, "I don't know where to begin. Maybe I should start by saying I love you. I always have. That's why this hurts so much." I wrote about the night he was born, how small his fingers were, how I'd promised Robert, my late husband, that I'd raise him to be kind, brave, and honest. I wrote about the laughter, the scraped knees, the late-night talks when he was in college. Then slowly, my pen began to shake as the pain crept in. "I gave everything I had to make sure you never felt alone," I wrote. "But now it feels like I'm the one left behind. You built a new life, and I wasn't even on the guest list." By the time I finished, my eyes were wet, the ink smudged in places. It wasn't a letter meant to scold. It was a plea, a desperate whisper from a mother who still wanted to be seen. I folded it carefully, placed it in an envelope, and stared at Daniel's address written on the front. My hands hovered over the envelope, ready to seal it, but I didn't. Instead, I set it on the mantel beside his graduation photo. A part of me hoped that just having it there might bring me peace. It didn't. The following days blurred into one another. I tried to stay busy, gardening, reading, baking, but everything I did felt empty. One evening, while washing dishes, the phone rang. My heart jumped before I even looked at the screen. Daniel's name didn't appear, but Jake's did. Jake had been Daniel's best friend since high school. They'd grown up together, built their first business idea together, failed together, and somehow stayed inseparable through it all. I answered quickly. "Jake, how are you?" He hesitated before speaking. "I'm okay, Mrs. Lewis. How about you?" "I've been better," I admitted. "It's been a rough few weeks?" "Yeah," he said quietly. I figured. Something in his tone made me uneasy. "Is everything all right?" He paused. "That's actually why I called." The sound of the running faucet filled the silence between us. I turned it off slowly. "Jake, what is it?" He cleared his throat. "Look, I don't want to step on any toes, but Daniel's not doing great right now." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" "He's been struggling," Jake said. "Financially, mostly. The business isn't doing well. He's been taking extra work, trying to cover bills, but it's been hard since the wedding." I leaned against the counter, gripping the edge. "He never told me any of this." "I know," Jake said softly. "He doesn't want you to worry." That hit harder than I expected. "So he's just suffering in silence, and I'm supposed to sit here pretending everything's fine?" "He asked me not to say anything," Jake admitted. "But I couldn't just watch anymore. He's been off lately, quieter than usual. I think he's scared of letting everyone down." "Everyone or me?" I whispered. Jake didn't answer right away. "Maybe both." I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. "He's my son, Jake. He shouldn't have to hide from me." "I know," he said gently. "But he's proud." "You know how he is?" I tried to steady my voice. "Where is he now?" "At home, I think. He's keeping to himself a lot. Claire's worried too." My throat tightened. "And she didn't call me either." "She's trying," he said. "But Daniel keeps telling her it'll just make things worse." I sank into a chair, the phone pressed tightly to my ear. "It's already worse," I whispered. There was a pause. "Maybe you should reach out, Mrs. Lewis. Just don't let your pride get in the way." The irony of his words wasn't lost on me. Pride. The very thing that had kept both me and Daniel from saying what we really felt. "Thank you for telling me, Jake," I said quietly. "I appreciate it." He hesitated. "Please don't tell him I called, okay?" "I won't." When I hung up, the house felt colder than before. I looked at the envelope still sitting on the mantel, the letter I'd never sent. For the first time, I considered what would have happened if I had mailed it. Would he have read it as love or as judgment? Would it have made things better or pushed him further away? The rain started again outside, soft at first, then heavier. I watched it trace lines down the window, blurring the world beyond the glass. In that moment, I realized something painful. Daniel wasn't just avoiding me. He was drowning quietly, trying to protect me from the truth. And for the first time, I didn't know if I wanted to be protected anymore. When Jake told me Daniel's business was failing, I couldn't breathe for a moment. The anger I'd been nursing for weeks vanished, replaced by something heavier: worry, guilt, fear. That night, I lay awake thinking about him, wondering if he was eating enough, sleeping enough, surviving. He hadn't called me, not once, not even to ask for help. And maybe that was my fault. Maybe I'd made it too hard for him to reach out. By morning, I couldn't stand it anymore. I grabbed my coat and keys before I could change my mind. The city felt gray that day, the kind of cold that seeps through your sleeves. When I reached their apartment, the hallway smelled faintly of coffee and dust. I hesitated before knocking, my hand trembling slightly. The door opened after a few seconds. Claire stood there, pale, her eyes red and puffy. "Oh," she said softly. "You're here." I nodded. "Can I come in?" She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Of course." The apartment was small, 2 rooms, maybe 3. A pile of papers sat on the table beside a half-empty mug. Laundry hung over the back of a chair. Despite the mess, it felt lived in, real. Daniel appeared from the other room, startled. His face looked thinner, shadows under his eyes. "Mom," he said quietly, "you shouldn't have come." I ignored that. "You look exhausted." "I'm fine." "You're not," I said. "Jake told me about the business." His jaw tightened. He shouldn't have done that. "I'm glad he did," I snapped. "Otherwise I wouldn't have known at all." Claire looked between us nervously. "Maybe I should make some tea." "No," Daniel said, his voice sharp. "This isn't a social visit." The words cut deeper than I expected. "Do you think I came here to scold you?" "I came because I'm worried." He crossed his arms. "You're always worried. That's the problem." I blinked. "The problem?" "Yes," he said, louder now. "You don't trust me to handle my own life." "You never did." "That's not fair," I said quietly. "All I ever wanted was to make sure you were okay." He laughed bitterly. "Exactly. You always think you know what's best. Even now you're here because you think I need saving." The tension in the room grew thick. I could feel Claire's discomfort like static in the air. "I didn't come here to fight," I said. "I came because I love you." He shook his head. "Love shouldn't feel like control." Those words stung worse than any accusation. "Control?" I whispered. "You think that's what this is?" Claire finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Please, both of you, stop." Daniel turned away. "You don't understand what it's like, Mom. Trying to prove myself. Trying to build something without you hovering over my shoulder." My throat tightened. I wasn't hovering. I was supporting. He looked at me then, tired, broken, angry. "You were deciding, always deciding for me." I opened my mouth to reply, but before I could, Claire's voice broke through again, soft, cracked, pleading. "Please stop," she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "This isn't helping anyone." I turned to her, shocked. "Claire." She wiped her eyes quickly. "We didn't tell you because we were scared. Scared you'd look down on us, on him. The apartment, the business, everything. We thought you'd see us as failures." Her words silenced me completely. Daniel looked away, ashamed. "Claire." She shook her head. "No, she deserves to know." She turned back to me, her voice shaking. "He didn't want you to see him like this. He didn't want your disappointment to crush him before he even had a chance to try." For a moment, all I could hear was the faint hum of the refrigerator. My heart felt like it had cracked open. "I would never think of you as failures," I said softly. Claire met my eyes. "Maybe not in words, but we can feel it, in the way you look at things, the silence when something doesn't meet your standards." I swallowed hard. "I didn't mean to—" "I know," she said quickly. "You didn't mean to. But that's what makes it harder." Daniel's shoulders slumped. "We just wanted to prove we could do it, without help, without anyone saying we weren't ready." I sank into the nearest chair, my knees weak. "I never realized you felt that way." Claire knelt beside me. "He loves you. He talks about you all the time. But every time he tried to reach out, he said it wasn't the right moment." I looked at Daniel, the same boy who once clung to my hand, crossing the street, now standing in front of me like a stranger I didn't know how to comfort. I thought I was protecting you, I said quietly. All this time I thought I was doing the right thing. His voice softened, breaking a little. You were, Mom, just too much sometimes. I nodded slowly, the truth of it sinking in. I see that now. Claire stood, glancing between us. Do you want some tea after all? Daniel smiled faintly. Yeah, that might be nice. I watched as she moved toward the kitchen, grateful for the small distraction. The air felt lighter, but the ache in my chest remained. Daniel sat across from me, his tone calmer now. The business will be fine. I just need time to figure things out. You don't have to do it alone, I said gently. He smiled faintly. I know, but I want to try. I nodded. I can understand that. He looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time in months, I saw something familiar in his eyes. Not the boy I'd raised, but the man he was trying to become. When I stood to leave, Claire handed me a cup to take on the road. Her hand brushed mine, a silent gesture of peace. Thank you for coming, she said softly. I smiled. Thank you for telling me the truth. Daniel walked me to the door. For a long moment, we just stood there. No more shouting, no more pretending everything was fine. I didn't mean for things to get so bad between us, he said. I just wanted to build something before involving you. The words hit me like a quiet confession, honest, raw. I understand, I said, my voice trembling. I really do. He nodded, and for the first time he hugged me, hesitant, fragile, but real. When I stepped outside, the evening air felt colder. The city lights blurred through the moisture in my eyes as I walked back to my car. I didn't cry right away, not until I reached home, sat in the silence of my kitchen, and finally let it all spill out. The anger, the guilt, the love that had nowhere to go. That night, I cried for him, for me, and for the space we'd built between us without even meaning to. And as the tears finally stopped, I realized the distance wasn't permanent. It was just something we both had to learn how to cross. I kept staring at the envelope like it might change its mind and jump back into the drawer. I can't keep doing this, I said aloud, more to myself than to the empty room. You should send it, Helen replied from the doorway, folding a tea towel in her hands. She'd come by without announcing it, the way sisters do when they know you need company. You really think so? I set the letter on my knee, fingers worrying the paper edge. What if he throws it away? What if it pushes him further? He won't, she said, pouring tea. Daniel reads everything you write. He always has. You say that like it's proof. I let out a short laugh that sounded like coughing. I spent half the night rewriting the same paragraph. Did you cross out the part where you tell him you're sorry? She asked quietly. Yes, I closed my eyes. I was ashamed of it at first. Then I realized I wasn't apologizing for feeling hurt. I was apologizing for not trusting him. You trust him now? She asked. I want to. That's why I'm mailing the letter. I smoothed the paper flat. I wrote, You don't need my permission to be happy, Daniel. You only need my love. That's beautiful, she said. Say it again to me. I repeated the line, and saying it out loud filled the room like a small, honest light. It steadied me. At the post office, the clerk was young and brisk, stacking packages with quick hands. Mail for domestic? She asked without looking up. International? I almost said, then laughed at myself. No, just priority, please. To my son. I pushed the envelope across the counter. You sending him something nice? She asked, smiling. A piece of my heart, probably, I said before I could stop myself. She paused and looked at me properly. That's the good kind of mail. He'll open it. On the walk home, I recited the letter again in my head, the neat sentences I'd agonized over. I tried not to imagine his reaction. I tried not to imagine nothing at all. Did you do it? Helen called when I stepped through the door. I mailed it, I said, dropping into a chair. I put it in the postbox myself. She crossed the room and sat opposite me. You did the right thing. Right thing, I echoed. The phrase hovered between us like something I wanted to believe. What if he doesn't reply? She asked, honest and blunt. Then I'll have said what I needed to say, I answered. I can't control his answer. She reached across and took my hand. And if he does answer? I don't know, I admitted. I'm afraid of both silence and sound. Days went by with the slow, cruel patience of a clock. I found myself listening for my phone, like someone trained to detect footsteps in a hallway. When it rang, I'd jump and then feel foolish when it was only a telemarketer or a wrong number. "Call him," Helen said the third morning. "Just a quick check-in. Don't make it a speech." "I can't fake ordinary," I said. "Not with him." "Try anyway. People forgive different things at different times. You won't know if you don't try." So I called, and the voice that answered was not his. "Hello, this is Claire," she said. "Can I help you?" "My name's Margaret." "Is Daniel there?" "He's around, but he asked for some quiet today." "Oh," I felt my resolve wobble. "Tell him I mailed something. A letter, from me." "Of course," she said softly. "He'll get it." Her tone was kind, and something inside me thawed just a little. "You're handling this well," Helen said later, when I told her about the call. "You didn't demand an immediate response. That's progress." "I don't know if it's progress or surrender," I muttered. The following evening, the doorbell rang and my heart did that familiar, foolish flip. "Delivery for Mrs. Lewis," a man called from the porch. I opened the door to a small, perfectly tied bouquet sitting on the step. White lilies, their petals still closed like secrets. Tucked inside was a slim card. "For you," I read aloud as I cradled the flowers. "From Daniel." My knees went thin for a second. Helen steadied me with a gentle arm. "Open it," she urged. My hands shook as I unfolded the card. The handwriting was unmistakable, hurried, a little crooked, like him when he'd scribbled thank you notes at Christmas. "Thank you, Mom. I love you too." That was all. Tears came unexpectedly at the absurd simplicity of it. Not the long, furious rain I'd imagined, but a slow release, like a faucet finally unclogging. I laughed and cried at the same time, feeling ridiculous and relieved. "He wrote back," Helen said, voice soft. He wrote back. "He sent lilies," I whispered, breathing in the faint green scent. "Why lilies?" "Maybe because they're simple and quiet," she offered. "Maybe because he knows you used to have them in your garden." I remembered the white lilies I'd coaxed through a bitter spring years ago, how he'd helped me plant them and then declared he'd only pick daisies for himself. Memory folded into memory, and the ache in my chest lightened by an inch. "Do you think it means he's ready to talk?" I asked. "I think it means he thought of you," Helen said. "That's a start." I pressed the card to my lips like a child with a letter from someone important. The house felt differently arranged, less like a courtroom and more like a room waiting for conversation. The next morning, I folded the lilies carefully into a jug of water on the kitchen table. I stood there for a long time, finger tracing the card's edge. "What will you do if he calls?" Helen asked from the doorway. "Listen," I said simply. "Really listen." A car engine hummed outside, then faded. I watched the street through the window. Ordinary neighbors, ordinary chores. The world kept moving, unaware of the small peace blooming on my table. Yet under that calm, a cautious question lingered. Would a few words on a card and a simple bouquet bridge what had been broken? Could a sentence like, "I love you too," undo months of silence? The doorbell rang again, sharp and sudden, and my hand froze on the pitcher. "Who could that be now?" Helen murmured. I walked to the door, lilies cool at my back, and peered through the peephole. A figure stood on the porch, bundled against the chill. For a heartbeat, I didn't recognize her. Then she lifted her face, and everything tightened in my chest. "Claire?" I breathed. She knocked once, then waited. The lilies trembled in my hand. The knock at my door made my heart skip. A small, precise knock, like someone rehearsing courage. "Hello?" I called, forcing my voice steady. "Hi," she answered, breathless. "Is now a bad time?" "No, come in." My hands wouldn't stop trembling as I opened the door. She stood there alone, the coat too big for her frame, eyes rimmed with red. She looked younger than I remembered, and more fragile. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, stepping inside like she was entering someone else's story. "You didn't have to wait outside like that," I replied, closing the door softly behind us. "Sit, do you want tea?" "Please." She sank into the chair as if it might vanish beneath her. "I'm sorry to drop by like this." "You sounded urgent," I said, pouring water. "Is everything all right?" She played with the hem of her sleeve. "No and yes. I don't know how to start." "Start with the truth," I told her. "I prefer plain words." She swallowed. "I'm pregnant." The words landed without fanfare, but they hit like lightning. For a second, nothing else existed but that small, impossible sentence. "You're pregnant?" My voice came out softer than I expected. With Daniel's? Yes. Her fingers found each other and twisted. His and mine. I didn't expect that. I felt a strange mix of shock and a warmth that surprised me. How far along are you? 3 months, she said. We just found out last week. Her smile was a tiny, hopeful thing. We wanted to tell you in person. We really did. We just kept delaying it because we were so nervous about how you'd react. Nervous? I repeated, trying to keep my face neutral. Nervous for what? That I would hate you? No, her voice cracked. Scared you'd think we were reckless, that we'd ruined everything. She looked at me, sincere and small. We didn't want to hurt you. You already know we were hurt, I said. And the truth of it surprised me. My tone wasn't angry. It was quieter, softer. But hurt doesn't mean I stopped loving him. She exhaled like someone relieved of a weight. I know you love him. I see it in the way he talks about you sometimes. He carries you with him even when he can't say the words. He does? I hadn't realized how much of him I still held, how my image lived on when I wasn't physically there. He does. He keeps your old jokes, your stories, the way you used to make him laugh when he was a little boy. She smiled, wiping at her cheek. Sometimes he shows me the photos on his phone and his face. It softens. That's good to hear. My voice softened more than I expected. It's strange, though. I always thought being missed would feel like a punishment. I tried to laugh and it sounded hollow. I'm sorry, she said suddenly, for how things happened, for not involving you sooner, for hiding it. You don't have to keep apologizing, I told her. I know fear does strange things to people. I reached out, impulsive, and took her hand. A small, human bridge. Her fingers were cold. We were terrified you'd disapprove. Her words were a whisper. And then when we finally did it, we felt like we couldn't go back. Go back to what? I asked. To a life where our choices were explained and negotiated with everyone around us, she said. We wanted something that felt like ours, even if it was messy. That makes sense, I admitted. It doesn't make it right, but it makes sense. She looked up. Hope and worry tangled together. Will you be angry forever? No. The answer surprised me with its certainty. Anger fades. What stays is the shape of things, the way we treat one another after the storm. I want to be honest with you. I've been so proud and so afraid at once. Maybe I made fear look like stubbornness. You were protecting him, she said softly. I get that now. I don't blame you for that. Thank you. The gratitude I felt was simple, almost childish. And thank you for telling me in person. That mattered. She laughed, a high, relieved sound. I was terrified I'd knock on the wrong door and have you scream at me. You'd have survived, I said, and we both smiled, small and awkward, as if trying on a new version of civility. Do you want to feel the baby? She asked suddenly, hands trembling. Not now, not yet, but later, when it's safe. I'd like that, I said, feeling something bloom in my chest that had nothing to do with pride. I'd like that very much. She hesitated, then asked the question I knew was coming. Do you accept me? For now, for him, for this? I looked at her, at the fatigue under her eyes, at the fierce gentleness in the way she spoke about our son. You're family now. Saying it felt like a small confession, an opening. The words shifted something inside me. They were the first honest thing I'd offered since the wedding news. Tears filled her eyes. You mean that? I do. I squeezed her hand. This won't erase the hurt, Claire. That takes time and honesty. But it changes the future. It makes space. She leaned forward and hugged me, sudden and fierce, as if trying to anchor herself. Thank you, she whispered into my shoulder. Thank you for not shutting me out. When she pulled back, her smile was wet but real. Daniel doesn't know I came, she said, looking suddenly guilty. I wanted to tell you together, but I panicked. He's at work. He asked me to wait. He's at work? I repeated. My chest tightened unexpectedly. Do you want me to call him? I can try to. No, she shook her head. Not yet. I wanted this to be between us first. To give you time. That's considerate. My voice softened. And brave. She stood up slowly, fingers still entwined with mine for a moment. I should go before he gets back. He might be surprised to find me gone. Wait, I said, suddenly anxious. Before you go, do you want me to make anything? Tea? Something to take with you? No, I should get back. Her smile was apologetic. But can I come again? To tell you how things are going? When it's safe? Of course, I said. Come when you need to. Don't hide. She hesitated at the door, like someone about to cross a threshold. Thank you for saying I'm family. You're welcome. I watched her pull her coat tight and step out into the late afternoon, lighter somehow. The hall smelled faintly of lemon and the damp outside. I closed the door slowly and stood in the quiet of my hallway, a strange warmth pooling in my chest that made me dizzy. Then, from down the street, the familiar rumble of a car, Daniel's car, rolled into the driveway. I could picture him, unsuspecting, his phone in his pocket, unaware of the confession that had just happened in my kitchen. He'll walk through the door any second. I hadn't told him she'd come alone. I hadn't told him she'd said she was pregnant. My throat tightened. Would he be furious that I'd let her go without him? Would he be relieved? Suspicious? I realized how thin the line between new beginnings and old resentments could be. The knock on the front door startled me, a quick, nervous rap that matched the quickness in my chest. I opened it, and there he was, not angry, not smiling, only earnest, weighing something behind his eyes that I couldn't read. We stood there, inches apart, the moment poised like the breath before someone speaks. Hi, he said finally. Is Claire here? He opened the door and froze for a second, like someone who walked into a picture he didn't recognize. Mom? His voice was low, surprised. Claire, what's going on? We were just talking, I said, reaching for something steadier than the sudden flutter in my chest. You two together? His laugh sounded fragile, the kind that's trying to steady itself. I didn't expect that. It's okay to be surprised, Claire replied, voice soft. I popped by earlier and she was kind enough to listen. You came alone? He asked, stepping fully inside. He looked smaller than I remembered, shoulders tense, eyes tired but clearer than before. We needed to say a few things, I told him. Sit down, please. He moved to the sofa slowly, like testing water. Okay, this is strange. You don't have to explain, I said. Not yet. There was a beat where none of us spoke, the kind that holds all the unsaid. Then Claire went ahead. I wanted to tell you first, Daniel, but I was afraid. Afraid of what? He asked, rubbing his forehead. Afraid I'd kill you for showing up at my mom's like this? No, she said quickly. Afraid you'd think I was doing this to cause trouble. I didn't want to hurt you. You didn't, he said, voice tight. Not on purpose. Then talk to me, I urged. Tell me what's been happening. He closed his eyes and let out a breath. It's been rough. The business took a hit after the supplier pulled out. I've been juggling projects, and then, I started making bad choices trying to fix things fast. Bad choices how? I asked, leaning forward despite myself. Short-term loans, expensive freelancers, trying to scale too fast, he said. I thought I could save time with money. It just made everything worse. I wish you'd told me, I said, voice smaller than my anger had been. I could have helped, maybe not fix it, but I could have been there. You would have said no, he replied, the old hurt surfacing. You'd have worried, suggested safer plans. I needed to see if I could do it my way first. You needed to see if you could sink? I shot back before I could stop myself. The words surprised both of us by how sharp they sounded. I didn't mean to. He stopped, swallowing. Claire has been working 2 jobs, nights at the cafe, mornings freelancing. She's been covering rent while I try to resurrect the company. Her fingers found his hand. I didn't tell you because I wanted you to see me as someone who could help, not someone who would be pitied. You did more than help, he said, voice breaking. You kept me afloat. No, she said quickly. We both did. You both did, I repeated, and in that small echo there was a new tenderness. I didn't know that. I felt like I'd been left out of everything. You were left out, he admitted, raw, because I thought you'd make it harder, because I thought your concern would sound like doubt. Maybe it did, I said, or maybe I made it sound that way without meaning to. You never meant to, Claire said. But it happened. Okay. He exhaled and ran a hand through his hair. So what now? We talk. We figure out numbers, cut unnecessary costs, maybe find a partner. I called a few people. You did what? I looked at him sharply. Jake introduced me to someone tentative, he said. A small investor maybe, if we can show a realistic plan. You should have told me about that too, I said, softer. I have some savings set aside. I could lend you money to bridge payroll, not as a handout, a loan. He stared at me as if I'd offered him the moon. You don't have to do that, Mom. I can't drag you into this. I'm not being dragged, I said, feeling something shift under the surface. I'm choosing to be here. If you want to prove yourself, prove it with me beside you, not barred from the room. You mean it? His eyes searched my face. I mean it, I replied. I was proud of how you tried to do it on your own, but proud and lonely can coexist. Let me help, and you can pay me back when things are steadier. No strings, just a plan. He shook his head, part refusal, part disbelief. I can't accept charity. It's not charity, Daniel. It's family. My voice softened. You promise to pay it back. You'll write the terms. We'll put it in writing. You'll keep me in the loop. Claire squeezed his hand, hopeful. We could use a real budget, honestly. I've been keeping track in a notebook. Cuts we can make, subscribers to retain, projects to pause. You've been doing all that? He asked, amazed. I couldn't stand watching you burn out, she said simply, so I did what I could. He looked at her, gratitude folding into relief. Thank you. I could see my guilt waver into a soft pride. You both have been carrying more than I realized. Too proud to ask, too proud to admit failure, he said, a rueful smile tugging. We messed up, we panicked. We can fix it, Claire said slowly. Okay, he nodded, steadying himself. If you're really offering, I'll accept, but I'll pay you back, every cent, with interest, if that makes you feel better. No interest, I said quickly. Just keep me involved. He laughed, a small, genuine sound that had been missing for months. Deal. We'll write it up tonight. Tonight? Claire's eyebrows rose. You've got energy. I have energy when I stop pretending nothing's wrong, he said, and when my mom is putting money on the table like a banker. I can be firm when I need to be, I quipped, and the room filled with something warm, an easing of edges. We sat and listed things aloud, expenses, possible clients, contacts Jake had offered, a schedule for Claire so she didn't collapse. Conversation flowed differently now, practical, humble, full of shared responsibility rather than accusation. You should slow down on those 2 jobs, I told Claire, at least until we stabilize. I'll schedule them better, she promised. And I'll let you see the ledger. No secrets. No more secrets, I echoed, feeling the phrase settle like a promise. He reached out and squeezed my hand. Thank you for not turning away. You're welcome, I said, and meant it in a way that felt like work, like a pledge that required effort, humility, graciousness. We drew up a tentative plan on a napkin, numbers, dates, who calls who, not a grand rescue, but a map. When the conversation wound down, Claire stood and moved to the cupboard. How about we plan a small dinner? Not loud, just us, to start over. A dinner? He asked, eyes bright. With your famous roast? With fewer speeches, I said, smiling. No announcements, just food and honest talk. And no surprises? Claire asked, playful for a moment. No surprises, I agreed. Just us. He looked at both of us, scarcely able to hide the relief. I'd like that. I'd like that more than you know. As we cleared the napkin plan and folded it into pockets, I felt the old wound change shape. It wasn't erased, and it would scar, but it no longer gapped like an open thing. It folded into something that could become a bridge. I stood and went to the window, watching the streetlights smear across the pavement. The house felt quieter in a different way, the kind that contained a promise rather than a threat. We'll cook together, Claire said suddenly from the kitchen, voice light. You show me your recipe, and I'll bring dessert. And we'll invite Helen, he added, and Jake. Small, no fuss. Small is perfect, I agreed, thinking of the dinner I had once imagined and the one we were now planning. Humble, honest, and ours. He nodded, eyes on me. One more thing. No secrets, Mom. Not anymore. Not anymore, I echoed, and for the first time in months, the words felt like healing rather than surrender. We moved toward the idea of dinner, like people stepping onto a newly repaired bridge, cautious but willing. The future wasn't fixed, but it was shared. The cliff ahead felt smaller because we were walking it together. The house smelled like boiled milk and lemon cleaner. The baby's blanket was warm against my palms. You okay holding her? Helen asked, laughing like she couldn't believe it was real. I feel overwhelmed, I admitted, rocking the little bundle gently, like somebody rewrote the script. She's perfect, Helen said, eyes bright. Look at that nose. He gets his nose from you, you know. Don't start, I said, smiling despite the tiredness under my eyes. I'll start bragging about his crooked grin. She's asleep, Claire whispered from the doorway, rubbing her forehead. Finally. She looks peaceful, Daniel said, coming up behind Claire, hands in his pockets, tired but steady. You look good, Mom. You're biased, I said, looking up at him. I always look good when my grandchildren are involved. He sat on the armchair, running a hand over his face. We can't thank you enough. Don't thank me, I said quietly. Just let me hold her. Claire moved beside me and rested a hand on my shoulder. We mean it truly. You've given so much. You both gave too, I answered. You worked in silence, and that matters more than you think. We messed up, Daniel said slowly. We should have let you in earlier. I know, I replied, and I should have listened more. That's on me too. He exhaled. I'm sorry for shutting you out, for being proud in a way that hurt you. You were trying, I said. You wanted to build something you could stand behind. I get that now. Claire's voice trembled a little. Sometimes I was so scared I'd mess up our life. I wanted to prove I wasn't a mistake. You're not a mistake, I said, feeling the words settle. You're stubborn and kind and brave in ways I didn't expect. She smiled, wiping at her eyes. Thank you. Helen chimed in, teasing to lighten the air. And you're making a fine baby so far. We'll teach her to bake cookies, but only the edible kind. Only the edible kind, Daniel echoed, laughing for the first time in months. I looked down at the child in my arms and felt a tenderness so big it almost hurt. What's her name again? I asked, wanting the ritual of naming to be present, small and sacred. We talked about it, Claire said. We're calling her Grace. Grace, I repeated, tasting the name. Fitting. She's lucky, Helen said. To have a family that argues but comes back together. We had to learn how to ask for help, Daniel admitted, and how to accept it without feeling weak. That's one of the hardest lessons, I said, especially for men who grew up thinking they had to do it alone. I thought doing it alone proved I could, he said. Turns out it just made me scared and stubborn. Being scared doesn't make you small, I said. It makes you human. Claire's hand tightened around mine. We promise no more secrets, she said. We're ready to try honesty, even when it's ugly. Even when it's ugly, I echoed. That's the real test. We'll set times to talk finances, Daniel said, practical. And I'll invite you to meetings. No more behind closed doors decisions. Deal, I said. And I'll keep some distance when you need to prove something, but not so far that you think I don't care. You're making rules now? Helen joked. Hey, someone's got to be the moral compass, I replied, smiling. The baby stirred, a tiny fist uncurling. She made a small sound, half breath, half thought. I felt every old hurt soften at once. You look tired, I told Claire. You should rest. I want to stay, she said. Just for a little while. You should rest, Daniel repeated, gentler this time. I'll make coffee. No, Claire protested lightly. You made coffee last time and it tasted like ambition. He's better with spreadsheets than espresso, Helen said. Hey, he laughed, standing. I'll have you know my spreadsheets are poetry. You and your spreadsheets, I said, delighted by the normalcy of it. I caught myself watching them, the two of them, weary and stubborn and alive, and thought about every lonely night I'd spent worrying over decisions that weren't mine to make. I had protected him in ways that sometimes boxed him in. I'd been proud and afraid in equal measure. We'll figure this out, Daniel said, voice steady with a new kind of resolve. Not perfect, but honest. That's what matters, I said. Honesty and stubbornness that's shared. Claire leaned over and kissed my forehead, soft, grateful. Thank you for giving her this. For giving her what? I asked. For a chance, she said simply. For family. I tightened my arms around the child and felt the steady rhythm of her breathing. A chance, I echoed. That's what we all needed. Helen cleared her throat. When are we having that dinner? Soon, I said. But let's not make it a production. Just food, stories, and no speeches. No speeches, Daniel promised, mock offended. I'll bring the salad and a sincere apology. That counts as a speech, right? You'll survive, Claire said, laughing. The room felt warm in a way it hadn't in a long time. The patches of darkness in our conversations had been sewn with small stitches of honesty. It wasn't complete healing, but it was progress, fragile and real. I rocked Grace a little more, watching her eyelids flutter. You know, I said quietly, more to myself than anyone, sometimes the hardest part of loving someone is letting them live their own story. What do you mean? Helen asked softly. That they'll make mistakes, choose paths I wouldn't pick, disappoint me, I said. But they're allowed to. And so are we, allowed to forgive, to step back, to step in. Claire rested her head on my shoulder. We'll do better, she whispered. For her. We'll try, Daniel said, and there was humility in the word that steadied my heart. The baby sighed, then made a small, unexpected sound, a tiny laugh almost, as if she'd found something funny in her sleep. I felt it in my chest like sunlight through a crack. My phone buzzed on the side table, a message from Jake. Great news about the investor. Call me. I looked at them, at the soft shapes of a family reshaping itself, and knew the road ahead would still have bumps. Money, work, tired nights, none of it disappeared. But for the first time in months, those bumps felt bearable because we were together. I put the phone face down and held Grace closer. The laugh she'd made echoed like a promise. Outside, the evening settled. Inside, we began to plan a modest dinner. Nothing grand, nothing showy, just a table where secrets were replaced with conversation. I closed my eyes for a moment and let the quiet settle, a calm that felt like both ending and beginning. The next morning would bring calls, numbers, and decisions. But for now, in the hush of the living room, I let myself believe that love, messy and imperfect, could still forgive and hold. If this story touched your heart, tell me what part spoke to you the most. Was it the pain, the forgiveness, or the quiet healing at the end? Your thoughts mean more than you know. Don't forget to subscribe for more real emotional stories that remind us how love, no matter how fragile, always finds a way back.